Hello everybody, thank you for welcoming me from Ireland here to talk at your conference in Romania. I'm honoured to do that, and I think it's a great topic, biodiversity, and it's good to know that colleagues across Europe are talking about the same important things. It's a good time now to be talking about biodiversity and landscape design. I think there is the same for the last 4 years working in Ireland. And today I'll give you a summary of my perspectives of working here in Ireland and my approach. I'll talk about the past, the future, I'll talk about cities, I'll talk about the rural countryside here, I'll talk about designing for resilience, or how I approach that. And we'll talk through scales, thinking of different scales, and then I'll give you some examples of projects that I'm working on. I'm working with a company called Temă. We're a multidisciplinary landscape architecture and design, town and environmental planning, and arboriculture practice in Ireland, and we have 4 offices across the country. Three offices across the country, sorry. I'm a landscape architect working in the landscape architecture side of things. So to look at the past, how we got where we are in Ireland, we're looking at a highly industrialised country where there's a lot of agriculture, industrialised agriculture, mainly peat cutting, where a lot of peat fields have been used for fuel. We've also got housing and industry around, like most countries. But in this country, the predominance is agriculture and peat cutting in our rural environments. And then, the rural and urban planning systems here are maybe a bit different to some other countries, but we tend in Ireland to develop a lot of housing within the countryside on small agricultural landholdings. So there is a proliferation of housing across the countryside, even though it's at very low densities. And we have government policy which tends to focus on intensification of agriculture, and at the moment there's not a lot of funding going towards NGOs that protect our protected areas. So as a result, we have a landscape in the rural countryside that's fairly depleted in terms of biodiversity. And this results for us in our biodiversity crisis, which is now compounded by economic and social crisis because of the war and cost of living and all of those things, energy, as everyone I'm sure is aware. So now we need to start a new era of being, change our ways. This map here is interesting in that it shows sort of an assessment of ecological integrity across at the European level, and the red areas that you can see here are areas of low integrity, and the greener areas are areas of higher integrity. You can see that Ireland is one of the lowest in Europe, along with the UK, and places like Sardinia, Sweden, Estonia, all very good. You can see here Romania is fairly good, and Bulgaria, I'd say, are have a fairly high ecological integrity. So you've got good wilderness areas there, and I would encourage you to hold on to those, or do everything you can to do that, to promote that. So, about looking at opportunities, how do we combat these sorts of low integrity areas is by looking at cores and corridors. So we need to find cores, which are positions of strength. These are usually the Natura 2000 nodes, protected areas, and then you link those nodes with corridors. So at a strategic level, you're linking positions or areas of strength with ecological corridors, and you can do that right through the scale. So we're looking at a map here at a European scale. You can zoom that right down to a site scale. But this gives you a flavour of what needs to be done at a European scale. So if we look at our future and how we tackle our cities and our rural hinterlands, we need to start connecting cores with corridors. We need a new vision as to how we can start with these positions of strength. So we need to look at our urban and rural planning systems and reform these to start maybe thinking about denser urban clusters, more ecological and efficient transport systems, and regenerative farming type systems in the agricultural land. And government policy needs and approach needs to change as well, and it is changing. It's changing very quickly, but it needs to be a fair change. So it needs to be a change that people can live with. We can't be prejudicing people in the countryside and chucking them off their farms because their farms aren't biodiverse or their farms are producing too much carbon. We have to be fair, so that's the way we have to deal with these things. Environment. So for the ecological city, we need low inputs and high gain. We need to work out ways of designing where we're designing efficiently with not putting too much into our design, but we're getting quite a lot back. So we have to design smart. We need to think of a new urbanism, so walkable cities, pedestrian cities, compact living, accessible green spaces, diverse communities, microclimates, nature-based solutions, I think, sums all of that up. Ecological design, community, human scale, jobs, keeping it local, food, food close to where people live, producing food close to where people live, circular thinking, and thinking about repair cultures and regenerative design. This is a new way we need to start thinking. We need to start thinking about our soft infrastructure as much as our hard infrastructure. So, the greenways, the walkways, mass transit systems, drainage systems, and then tie all of these things in so that they all kind of overlap with each other. And in a way, this is the same for our rural areas. We need to think about shared transport, greenways, ecotourism. How do we change our farming practices into maybe other ways of earning incomes? So more wildlife parks, creating tourism that way. Community food, and then ecological restoration on a large scale, but also renewables like wind and tidal and solar. So the role of the landscape architect here is to make places for human communities, but also to make places for plant and animal communities, habitat, and then start thinking of those as the same thing. Where there's a sort of biophilia, that we are creating a symbiosis between us as the humans designing these places and living together with our wilder animals and plants. Through the design process, this is done by understanding the place, understanding and identifying the opportunities. So we need to understand the ecology of the place, we need to understand the history and the culture. We need to then look at the opportunities, the ecological opportunities, the cultural opportunities, and then create this vision, and then think about ideas around that vision, and then when we've got these ideas down on paper, we then oversee that change when they're implementing on site, and create then a framework for managing these spaces. So management plans, low input management plans, and community partnerships. So when designing for resilience, like I said earlier, I think there's a lot to be said for less is more. So instead of trying to fill our designs with things and creating rich landscapes that's highly, that's quite intensive, what we can start doing is thinking about what not to do rather than what to do. So which areas of the site do we leave alone? And the more we leave alone and let nature do what it wants to do and what it naturally would do, the better. And to do that, you start by looking at your areas of strength. So what on your site is an area of strength? Keep that, but also for cultural things. What are your cultural strengths and your social strengths? And build upon those. And then create this sort of symbiotic vision for the landscape where you create a space for humans, animals, plants living together. And when you're developing your framework for management, make sure that it's kept simple, flexible, with low inputs. Do without chemicals if you can. Do without fertilizers if you can. Herbicides, all of those sorts of things, and allow nature to flourish. Cut things once a year, if you wanted to keep them as meadows, otherwise let them grow. So I also want to talk about thinking in scales. So we're talking about a very large scale at the European level, but we need to talk about, we need to look at it at a very small scale as well. So you need to understand that the wider context, as wide as you can for your site, and then figure out a strategic framework that ties in the wider site into your site. So it's the broad scale thinking. So leave out all the detail to start with. And then you start looking at the site more specifically and coming up with bespoke, tailor-made ideas for that site, understanding the context. And then you add more and more detail and richness, but obviously keeping it efficient and cost efficient as well. So the implementation, you need to be thinking about cost, buildability, protections on the site, what features to protect, and then management to be minimized. So I'll just run through some examples quickly of the sorts of projects I've been working on here in Ireland. And this is trying to show how these ideas are put into practice. So the first project is the Amazon headquarters, which is in Beldon, in south-west Dublin. You can see where the star is there, it's just outside Boring Road. And it's a 45-hectare site where we developed sort of 16.5 hectares of swales to accommodate floods. These are grasslands, natural grasslands, and we've got over 1,000 native trees, seeded meadows, native shrubs, the focus here is on ecological design, but there's also an element of ornamental design and amenity design. So that's where the site is. I've outlined it there, and really it's alongside the Casement Aerodrome, which is Dublin's main sort of military airfield. So it's sandwiched between the military airfield and a busy M3 carriageway which leads out, leads out of Dublin to the southwest. So it's a little bit sort of sandwiched in there, and we've got some constraints put upon us from an ecological point of view of an airfield next to an ecological site where there's conflicting requirements, I suppose. An airfield doesn't want birds, for instance, near its airfields, and we do. So we have to reach some serious compromises, and I'll talk to you about that. That's an area we'll be looking towards of the site before developing, looking towards the coast. In the easterly direction, you can see the Dublin Mountains to the south. That's the site. It's a large site, and I'll talk more about the scale of these buildings. So it's a little bit difficult to get your head around the scale of it, but it is large. That's just one of the buildings. That's the biggest, the largest building in the development. The building alone is 7 hectares in area. And this is to serve Amazon's main distribution network in Ireland. So they have particular spatial constraints, and that's why you see that huge parking area, which is for large lorries. But everything around that and around the buildings, we're treating very sensitively from an ecological point of view. The latest sort of phase of the development is now underway on site. It's unit F and G. That's phase 4. We're busy with that at the moment. We developed a series of loop walks around the site where we've got them all measured off and signposted, and so there's an amenity element to it where people can do lunchtime walks or even running. So we have a short walk here, which is through a marsh. We have a longer riverside walk, which is all the way along the Cannock River, which is to the south of the site. And we have a loop around the buildings, which is nearly 2 kilometers. These large areas you can see to the north of the buildings are all large swales. So if you think of that as a 7 hectare building, that swale there alone is larger than the building. And that's just one basin, that's one attenuation basin that takes potential flooding from a river. And these are all linked through a series of basins that overflow in this direction to the east. And when one fills up, it overflows to the next. So it's a massive, sustainable urban drainage developed sort of native marsh meadows, and we put in some seating and some paths for people to use it. So it's a recreational facility as well as a drainage and habitat, and we try to overlay all these elements. The walk along the river, which is mostly seeded with native wildflowers. Here we've decided to seed it because we would like a little bit of amenity effect as well. In some cases we don't even seed it, we just let the natural seeds grow. If we're introducing seed, we need to be very careful that we're introducing native seed as locally, with as local provenance as possible. So sourced from as local an area as we can get. And that's not always easy to get that. Restoring the riverbanks, so we created a buffer along the river, a walkway along that buffer, and we need to restore that. So a lot of that was just letting nature do its own thing. We've got the spillway, which required an engineering overflow, and there, again, it's seeded with native grasses and marsh-type grasses, and it's cut once a year. We've got some swales using basically stone and subsoils. So we've got subsoils on the side banks, and we've got stone at the base of these swales, and we just seed directly into the subsoils without the need for any topsoil at all. So the low nutrients of the subsoil is what we want for the diverse wildflowers. Along the way, we've got these interpretation boards. I think this is very important as well to include in any ecological scheme, because you want them to talk to people about your ideas, to connect people with the landscape. Without this is part of the symbiosis element, you know, it's connecting people and the landscape and the ecology. We've also got this not only for the ecology, but we've also got it for cultural things like archaeology and the history of the aerodrome, the history of the area. So there's boards on ecology and culture. And then how we treat the actual facades of the building. We can try and climbers up the sides to try and soften it. We've got tree planting along the sides of the buildings. So they're very large buildings, and we need to try and soften them visually as well as from an ecological point of view. We've also got ornamental planting closer to the buildings and around the car parking areas, and this is obviously a requirement of the client to create beauty, but it's also, we're thinking of pollinators, so the flowers are chosen for their pollination value. And then aesthetics, the tree-lined avenues are a very important feature to try and create an order. So you have wilder areas, the edges of the site, and more order towards maybe the centre of the site and around the buildings. So there's a strategy to that. We have these very large swales that I mentioned, all connected at the north of the site, and the way that we've dealt with those is we haven't even seeded them. We just let them go do their own thing, and they're growing. You know, as you can see, it's not an instant effect, but eventually these areas colonize with the plants that they would naturally want to colonize, even though the soils that we've used are without any seed beds any natural seed beds. It's subsoils. One way we could do it, and we probably might try doing it, is storing a bit of topsoil, high quality topsoil, and spreading a very thin layer on the surface, and that might just help it colonize quickly, because there'll be a bit of seed in there. But we don't want the nutrients, we want the seed. So very thin layer is what we'll be trying next time. You can see here, you might not be able to see, but there's netting above these swales. They're giant nets, and that's to keep the birds, when these areas flood, and there can be lots of birds coming in these wetland areas. The neighbouring air, the airbase didn't allow this, so we had to cover these areas to prevent the birds. So there is an irony there, in that we're designing for nature, but we're having to prevent nature from getting to it. But these are the sorts of constraints that we have to live with. The next project is Esco Lawn Cemetery. It's a different type of project. It's in to the west of Dublin as well, a little town called Lucan. It is a lawn cemetery, 2.5 hectares in area. I'll try and speed up, I can see I'm running out of time. And that's where it is, relative to Dublin. that's the layout. So we've got a situation where we have a pipe that's draining the water from the neighborhood through our site and into this open canal here. And what we're wanting to do, what we have done, is we've opened the pipe, we've daylighted the water, and we've created a biological filtration system to clean the water from the neighborhood drainage system as it goes through our site, so that when it leaves our site, it's clean. So that was one of the aims and objectives from this project. So that's a close-up of that particular water feature. The water that's coming into the system here is actually a lot more polluted than we thought. But it's early days, when we think so far anyway, the filtration system is working. That's the site before we started developing it. You can see most of so it's a valley landscape, it's a little valley, but there's a concrete pipe at the bottom of that valley draining the water from the neighborhood into an open canal at the end of it. So here's a few photographs from construction, and then here are some photographs as it is at the moment. It's not yet finished, but it's nearly finished. And the water feature, we haven't yet got electricity to the site yet, so we haven't started the pump system where we're going to be pumping the water to help aerate it and create a flow, a stronger flow. That hasn't started yet. But that's an aerial view of the cemetery at the moment. It's not quite finished yet, but it's opening up for business. And as you can see by the materials that we've chosen, they're very soft and calming in harmony, and that's a very deliberate thing, as it has to be a very welcoming, calming place. A residential scheme in Nuth called Maria Villa. This scheme is all about green corridors, connecting spaces with green paths and corridors. It's about a green network, and that's what the scheme was based on. So we started off with this network of green corridors using the river that runs through the site as the main spine, and then building off using hedgerows and tree lines, existing tree lines and hedgerows to form the network, the core network of existing features. And then we build the houses and the spaces in between. And this is now finished and open, and we've got some photographs here, so you can see cores and corridors again with the principle, and we've just won an Irish Landscape Institute award for this project for biodiversity. We've got social spaces within these green corridors. We have a lot of the interpretation for biodiversity. We have things like bat boxes and bird boxes and all that sort of thing as well. And then the last project I'd like to talk about today, which is a voluntary project that I'm working on in my own spare time, close to the place where I live, which is where the yellow star is, in the middle of the country. This is a little fragment of an ancient woodland that I'm working with the Native Woodland Trust to expand. So I've worked for 2 years on the project already, and managed to purchase some land surrounding this little fragment of ancient woodland from local farmers. That was a long process, but we got there. And now we're starting to expand the woodland into these what were previously farmed fields. But the important thing about this woodland is that it's ancient. It's at least been around since the 1600s. It's on the maps, the old maps from 1600, so we are aware that it's been around since then. It's likely that it's been around longer than that, maybe since the Ice Age. So the tree stock within this woodland is ancient, and the DNA of the seed is quite precious, and this is what we want to spread. We want to spread woodlands like this, and make sure that they're not lost in the Irish landscape, because at the moment they're very, very rare. 0.2% of the Irish landscape is covered in ancient woodland, where it was once 80. This has been reduced down to 0.2. 11% of the Irish landscape is covered in forest, 2% of that is native, and 0.2 is ancient. So that just gives you a flavour of how rare this is. And that's the site. So the orange area includes the lands that have just been bought, and the darker green area where it says woodland is the little fragment of ancient woodland. So working with community members, we've been, and with the Native Woodland Trust, we've been gathering support, collecting seed to grow our own trees, and so that we can do some strategic planting. You can see here the open fields that we're going to be expanding into. That's the edge of the woodland in the middle. The current edge, the farmers were chopping away at it, and we've now stopped that. And we're now going to expand outwards. And that's a little plan that I put together. You can see the little islands of what we might call seed islands. We will plant seed or little seedlings into those little islands, and then the seed will spread naturally from there. We also have barrier belts along the edges of the site. We're going to be doing some strategic planting of locally sourced native seed and seedlings into those areas. And we're going to be removing some existing footpaths through sensitive parts of the site and making new footpaths through other areas of the site. So this is the current plan for that little woodland. So again, it's about bringing people in as well, and allowing people to experience this precious little site. And yeah, just to show you a few images of what we're working from, these positions of strength. It's a little microcosm, but it's a position of strength nonetheless, and we have to build from that. That's a little red squirrel that was taken on a camera trap inside Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you very much.